So welcome, Greg. It's an honor to have you on our podcast. Love to break into a little bit of your background to give our audience some insights into you and your journey and in developing your career and how you got to where you are today with Capital Rivers, being in business now for 11 years, 2015 being when you founded it.
Yep.
Our journey as friendship, like I met you years ago through charity work. And it's so cool to see how your heart for kids and for foster youth led our friendship, and seeing how you've impacted so many people through your work and through your efforts in the community. Give you some background. So Greg is the founder and president and CEO of Capital Rivers Commercial. Not only are they a huge presence in Sacramento, but they also have offices in Chico and Redding. Greg is a Sacramento lifelong resident. And like I said, he found this in 2015. What's amazing is he didn't have a bunch of equity or any real backing. He had to use sweat equity and really wise strategic decisions around what he built in starting this company. And to hear that story, it's going to be so cool for our audience who have a heart for wanting to become entrepreneurs and to get out into the scary world of building your own business, And, what's cool about Capital Rivers is they work with national, they work with regional, they work with local clients, and they've completed projects across the West Coast and beyond, including service-oriented retail, aviation facilities, auto-related uses, and healthcare projects, and around senior care and dialysis clinics. And they mainly focus a lot of it around land acquisition and development. But there's other things you'll go into and explore. You attended Sac State, go Stingers. Yep. And, shortly after graduation, you worked in land acquisitions and entitlements for Richmond American Homes, and you transitioning into commercial and retail residential. And what's so cool is you've worked with some really amazing people locally. When I met you, you had just transitioned out of Sleep Train, and hearing, yep, you working with Dale Carlson, who's just such an amazing presence in our community. And I'm sure you've learned so much from him. We look forward to hearing about that. And you've done stuff from site selection, leasing, entitlements, construction management, portfolio management, national rollout programs. You've done every stage of commercial real estate transactions. So it's really cool to hear it'll be cool to hear your practical hands-on understanding of all these different elements of commercial and development. And what else? You didn't come from an entrepreneurial family. So a lot of the people out there is but I don't come from an entrepreneurial family. How can I get into this? It'll be cool to hear you share how you've done that, how you've been able to overcome not having that background, in how you built a career gradually with experience, relationships, and execution. You were saying how you grew up with a single mother, had to support your family, and how that shaped your work ethic and your focus on building long-term stability for your clients, your team, and your own family. And that can't wait to hear more about how your professional growth really was shaped by your family members, mentors, colleagues, and partners who really challenged you and helped you improve over time. And I remember, meeting you when you first met. We're getting married and moving into your deep relationship with Brooke, and now you have two daughters who are growing up, and they're your high priority. And so you're an amazing family man. I've seen that firsthand, and you've got a number of different things you're involved in the community, from being on the board with Clara to being Team California, which is a nonprofit organization of cities and counties focused on advancing economic development across the state. And just can't wait to break into all this for you. And somebody who's a big fan of yours, can't wait for everybody else to be a big fan of everything you do for your team, for the community, and for your family. So welcome, Greg Aguirre, to
very much, and I'm a big fan of
yours
as well, and excited for all your success. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're honored, man. So I'll let the play-by-play man Dominick kick us off with a good first question to get us rocking and rolling.
Absolutely. No, thank you for that incredible introduction, Justin. Greg, we're one of the places that we absolutely love to start with, guests that we have on, is the beginning. So going to the start of your origin story. Not everybody, as they're growing up, thinks to themselves, hey, I'm going to go into real estate or commercial real estate or real estate development. So, can you take us back to those beginnings and gradually take us, through the evolution?
Yeah, in high school, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I actually took some time off and I moved up to Southern Oregon because I have family up there. And it was just kind of a summer job. I worked at this place called Lake of the Woods Resort, just doing whatever they needed. And Through that, got to know the owner, a guy named Doug Newman, who was a real estate developer in Southern Oregon. And I didn't know really what a real estate developer was. That was new to me. I just knew that he built these really cool buildings and he had some really neat cars. And, uh, and he hired me to wash those cars. And he had a really big house and some cool stuff. And he was a nice guy and he was willing to, kind of drive me around and show me what he was working on. And um, I kind of decided there and then that, I want to build stuff. I always thought that, I'd get into, I don't know, the trades or something environmental. I liked working with my hands. So I figured, hey, why not get into development? And so I decided I would try to learn as much as I could about it. I didn't want to live in Southern Oregon anymore. I stayed there for a little while and went to Southern Oregon University for a semester, but then decided to come back to Sacramento. Went to American River College for a little while for undergrad and then went over to Sac State. And I figured my first step was get my real estate license. So I did that. And then I figured, I don't know who was going to kind of hire me. I was still going, through college. So I went to the Century 21 office near kind of where I lived at the time, residential, and said, hey, would you bring me on? And his name was Steve. He said, sure. And had no idea what I was doing and decided I would start by selling homes. And so I did that and I sold a few homes, kind of realized that wasn't really my thing. It's a very emotional decision and, it's, whether they like the tile or, whatnot. But I ended up finding 4.5 acres of vacant land behind Zinfandel Grill here in Sacramento. And I was like, I think that'd be a great location for development. So I reached out to the owner and, asked him if he wanted to list the property. He said no, but I just kept at it and kind of built a little bit of a rapport with him. And then he said, hey, why don't you meet me at Denny's in, I think it was in Emeryville. So I took the chance, drove out to Emeryville. We had breakfast. He said, look, I'm not going to list it with you because it's a good rental income, but if you find me a deal, I'll work with you, which is funny because I tell the brokers nowadays, like, try not to do unprotected work, have a listing agreement, but I didn't have a whole lot else going on at the time. And so I found a developer, he made an offer on it. We put it together, we sold it. I still have that commission statement somewhere in my drawer that I probably need to frame, but it was the most money that I'd ever made in my whole life at like 23, I think, something like that. And I was like, I want to do this. I want to sell land. So I started going to planning commission hearings and I actually sent out handwritten letters to all the developers in Sacramento. I got the book of lists from the Business Journal. And the only one that replied was a guy named Fred Katz, FHK Development. And I still from time to time keep in touch. And he was willing to, have me come to his office and show me what he did as a developer. Kind of going full circle, I actually ended up working with his partner's grandson on some projects, which was just by coincidence. But and then worked for there was a guy named Danny Benvenuti Jr. who owns Tower Development, and he was building small subdivisions in Carmichael. And a friend that I met who was on the Carmichael Planning Advisory, who I still keep in touch with, Todd Chambers, just great guy, put me in touch with him and said, hey, you should talk to this guy. He's, looking for land. So I met him and, he wanted me to go find sites for him. I worked out a deal where I was on a draw against future commissions, but I didn't have to pay those back. He could fire me at any time. So I didn't want to be in debt to anybody. And then I would spend my weekends and time when I'm not at school or, hanging out with friends, driving around, knocking on doors, trying to get people to sell, an acre to 5 acres in kind of the greater Sacramento area, and had some successes and sold some properties to them. And that was kind of the start of it all. And then did an internship at Centex Homes while I was in college, graduated, got a job at Richmond American Homes. They put me through a really great training program in Colorado, which is where they're headquartered. Came back, did land acquisitions, housing market tanked, kind of saw the writing on the wall. Nothing penciled anymore. They weren't acquiring anything. And I was like, this isn't going to work out long term. So I got a job at a company called Armstrong Development, who was not in California at the time. They're based out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and they had an office in Phoenix, and they were a preferred developer for CVS Pharmacy. And at that time, CVS was coming to California. And so I was their first employee in Sacramento, and worked with a guy named Chris Bernard, who was my boss. And we kind of opened the office together. And that's kind of where it all started. And that's what got me into more on the commercial retail side.
I got one quick question. Then we'll go into okay. So every success story has some crazy stories involved. Like, I'm curious, like you went down that road of knocking on doors and doing all that. Do you have like one crazy story that stands out of like knocking on doors and someone comes like a shotgun or like a crazy dog that like jumps out of the backyard at you and you have to run out? Is there anything like, I feel like overcoming hard things is one of the core elements.
I've got a lot of those stories throughout my journey, but specifically in those early years, I didn't really know what I was doing. So I was just harassing the title officers for ownership information, because at the time you couldn't go online and get it. So you had to go into their office, and then I would just knock on doors and send letters. And, for the most people were fairly nice. Although, some of these like larger plots of land in Carmichael that have, been there forever, you get some kind of recluse people that have just like, they don't want to be bothered, and everything's overgrown. And I remember there was one off of, I think it was kind of near Ingle, somewhere over in the Carmichael area. And it was like, they had a cow actually in like a pasture, and it was all overgrown. And there was this long kind of road to their house and a gate, and it was dark, and like the gate was somewhat open. And I was like, I don't know, should I go in? And I was like, all right, I'll take the chance. And I walked in, and I got to the door, and somebody yelled out at me, "Get off my property, I've got a gun." And so I started back to the car. But I don't know if they did or not. But I mean, you meet a lot of interesting people in this business. And especially a lot of those people don't want to be bothered, right? They've owned the land forever, and tons of people are harassing them to sell the land, for development. And it wasn't easy, that's for sure.
That's what I wanted. Like, what's that, like you just shared, like, what's that story of them almost coming out with a shotgun, and you're like, oh, okay, I'm getting that.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's a fantastic foundation, for the conversation today. And I would like to dig a little bit deeper. Like for you, during your college years, to be doing, both school full time and, doing this real estate stuff on the side, like that. And, as Justin alluded to, this, all those things you did certainly takes grit. Can you share a little bit about like what was the source of your inspiration? Was it the fact that you spent time with that real estate developer in Southern Oregon who had been incredibly successful, and you're like, hey, this is kind of the life I want for myself and my family? Is there something else? Like, what was that driving force for you?
Yeah, I think it was just wanting more. I grew up kind of divorced parents. My mom was fairly poor. She was a ballet teacher and made less than, what she would have made if she was on welfare, but she was just very prideful. And, my dad was a government worker, a good job, but didn't make a lot, cubicle kind of worker. And, so just didn't have a lot. And, my dad eventually kind of moved onto the outskirts of this neighborhood that was a better neighborhood because he wanted to get me into that school district. And I realized like a lot of those kids, kind of came from families with money and things. And I wanted more opportunity for myself and for my future family. I didn't want to have to worry about money and struggles and kind of, I saw my mom struggle. And, and so I think my motivation initially was just security and, financial stability and being able to give my future, wife and kids and myself more opportunities and experiences. So it was, I think I liked because I thought about this a lot actually recently. Like, why did I get into this business? And I think initially I liked the rush of putting deals together and overcoming challenges. But I'm not gonna lie, it was the money too. I didn't come from money, so I wanted it. It's changed, and we'll get into that a little bit later in terms of kind of my motivations now and my drive, and I've since matured more. But yeah, that was it. Just didn't want to struggle and didn't want my kids to have to struggle.
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing that. And I've seen time and time again, and other people have shared like these motivations they do gradually change and evolve over time, and like that's just part of like the whole journey and the whole process. When you're younger and you're starting out, you're hungry and you want to build something great, and then on the flip side, you have a very different perspective of wanting to potentially leave a legacy or be able to support certain causes that are important to you. And I do certainly want us to circle back to some of these causes that you're involved in. We can dive into that a little bit more, but we'll come back to that. So getting back to your story, you pivoted over to commercial real estate. You're opening these various developing these various locations for CVS Pharmacy, right?
Yeah, and I started at the very beginning, like putting tour binders together and like the basics, and then just pushed myself to do more. Because you got to go get what you want. And so then I started, sending out the offers and negotiating the terms and putting the deals together. And then I found, that I was actually pretty good at it. I could find creative solutions to, because CVS wanted like the best real estate on the, the prime corner. And that's not always easy to get. And so you'd have to get really creative to kind of put those deals together. And oftentimes it's parcel assemblages, or you're dealing with somebody that's owned the property forever and they have no desire to sell. I mean, I've got so many stories, like we don't have enough time to kind of get into all of them, but I found myself being pretty good at kind of putting deals together and coming up with different structures. And so I leaned heavily into that, and then wanted to learn more about entitlements and construction. And, I was just hungry to learn as much as I could. And then I kind of outgrew that position to some extent. Armstrong was a great training ground, but there wasn't a lot of opportunity for future growth. So I had an opportunity to go over to Chase Bank, JP Morgan Chase, in their real estate department. And this was around the time when a lot of the banks were failing. So they were acquiring some of those failing banks. So Chase had acquired Washington Mutual from the FDIC. And at the time, they were trying to figure out which ones to keep and which ones to reject and not take on. And then, converting those. And then also what they call de novo locations, or new locations, filling in the gaps. And so they were on a huge expansion at the time. And so I wanted more experience. So I went and did that. Very corporate environment. I'm not built for that. I did good in it because I worked hard, and but wasn't where I wanted to be long term. But it was a great experience doing ground up projects for Chase and conversions, and so that was a great experience. And but then I they kind of slowed down because the banking regulations changed a little bit. And I had the opportunity to go over to Sleep Train, which also owned Mattress Discounters in Sleep Country, which was located here in Rockland. Kind of local legend. Dale Carlson started it, actually, at Sac State with his fraternity brothers. And it took off. He had success. And he kind of learned it as he went too. But at the time that I was brought on, they had about 150 stores, give or take. And the objective was to grow. And so we grew it up to about, I think, roughly 315 stores, went into a couple different states, did a couple ground up projects, a lot of new, leasing and conversions, a lot of M&A of smaller retailers, mattress retailers. And then I handled all the facilities and construction and all of that. So I did that for a number of years. And, Sleep Train was just a great organization. In fact, a number of our people here at Capitol Rivers came from Sleep Train. We have 3 brokers, and our in-house counsel all came from Sleep Train. And Dale just did a really great job of, building culture and always trying to improve. But, he sold the mattress firm. I didn't want to do the corporate thing anymore. And so I quit. There's a whole story behind that, but we won't get into that today. And then lesson learned, I should have told my wife because it was kind of an emotional decision, but she understood. She kind of freaked out. I kind of freaked out. And I decided, you know what, I'm going to be a developer, even though I didn't have the money. I had a friend and his dad, so Latanzio's, and they were willing to be the kind of the equity. And so I got sweat equity, and I gave it a shot. And my wife was pregnant. We were buying a more expensive house. So I was freaking out. Development takes a long time. I was doing some brokerage deals here and there. Actually applied for a lot of jobs along the way. Just when I'd get kind of worried about things, I'd start applying for jobs and went on interviews, and almost took a job at SMUD in their real estate department because they'd offered me a job with, pretty decent pay and benefits. And, my wife kind of wanted me to take that for the security, but I just, I couldn't do it. I needed to see this through. And so I turned that down. And, first project was here in Sacramento, and it was a success. It had a lot of challenges, more than I wish the first project had, but that's usually how it works out in life. And ended up making some money, but not a lot. And then did a deal or a project down in Merced, a CVS and Starbucks. That deal had a lot of hair on it. There's a whole story behind that. You could spend an hour on that too, putting that structure together. But that deal actually made some decent money. And so that's where it kind of started. And then I took that, invested into developing a Popeyes in Merced across from In-N-Out Burger. A friend of mine, Blake Megdahl, was my equity partner in that deal. He's actually the grandson of the money for FHK, so it goes full circle for Fred Katz. And then it's just kind of grown from there. And now 11 years later, we've done a ton of different projects. We've got 27 people at the company. We've got property management, brokerage team, and we're doing healthcare development as well. And I feel like we're just getting started. Like there's a long ways to go still.
So if I could take a step back, Greg, that moment that you made that decision to leave Sleep Train and start real estate development, I feel like every entrepreneur goes through this like white knuckle phase of like, hey, I'm going to give it all I got. I may not make it, and like you also have this dynamic of, your wife, who at the time sounds like was pregnant. And so it's like, what inspired you to make that leap? Was it just not wanting to be in part of, bigger corporate culture? Like take me through your thought process at that time. And I have a secondary follow-up question to that is a little bit more on the personal side, but if you can.
I don't want to say I wasn't a good employee, but I wasn't like the corporate ladder guy. I mean, I would work really, really hard. And what I'd realize is that I would just get more added to my plate, but it didn't necessarily mean that I made more money or I got a promotion. It was, I didn't play the politics game really well. And I didn't want to play the politics game either. And so I just kind of got burnt out from working for somebody else in the corporate, environment. And, at the time there was kind of some things with Mattress Firm that I didn't necessarily agree with, how they were doing business. And turns out that, that I was correct in my assumptions. There was some lawsuits and things of that nature if you Google that, but I didn't want to be associated with that. And so that was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. It was like, enough's enough. I'm going to go do something on my own and see if I can make it work. I'm can be pretty stubborn at times. And, I was able to make a decent living for myself in college. So it's like, now that I've got this skill set and I know some people, why not? What do I have to lose?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, in terms of the communication, with your spouse, like as an entrepreneur, like they're along for the ride, right? You have, high highs, you have low lows, and, there's, everything in between. So how have you, what things have you found to be helpful in that communication with your significant other that you feel like other entrepreneurs can learn from?
Yeah, boy, that's a tough one. She's not an entrepreneurial person. She was a school teacher, and not really anyone in her family is entrepreneurial either. And so kind of like, I was told from a number of people, like, get a good job that has good benefits and eventually you'll have a nice retirement. She's kind of told the same thing, right? Like, get a good job, a pension, and it'll all work out great. And so for her, it was all about stability and comfort. And so I'm not gonna lie, it wasn't easy. It was tough, and I was working a lot and I was stressed out, and to some extent that's still the case. There's ebbs and flows for sure. And you learn from those. And so, I think a lot of communication. I could have done a better job of this at the time, but I'm trying more now, is like carving out time for your spouse, even though you might be incredibly busy, still have a date night, still have time to talk to each other. Don't hide all your feelings and emotions, share them even when it's tough. But those were lessons that I had to learn kind of the hard way. Unfortunately, I didn't have great examples growing up, with divorced parents. So, but she's, we've stuck through it and we're stronger than ever. And we've got two beautiful girls. And so, I'm a big believer that good things in life are not supposed to be easy, that it's intended to be a challenge, and that you learn something from those challenges. And so kind of continually reminding myself of that makes it easier. Yeah. God has a plan. Absolutely. I don't know what it is, but
yeah. No, there's another saying too. If you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans.
Tell him your plans. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and I think we all think that comfort is what we desire. And so like, oh, I want to get that. I want to get to that end point of like, of a comfort, or like, I won this. Like they talk about in the Olympics, that Olympic winners, they think that when they get the gold, that life is going to be great and they're going to be super comfortable and they're going to be happy and it's just going to be long-term fulfillment. And what they find out, it's actually the process of making progress and striving and being in that challenging environment, that's actually the part that's fulfilling. And it's not getting to the end.
And it doesn't always feel that way in the moment, but
no, it does not at all feel that way. But Dr. Arthur Brooks, who's amazing on this type of stuff, like he talks about like measuring, like progress, satisfaction through progress, enjoyment of loved ones, and meaning. Like those are the three, he calls them macronutrients that creates the type of fulfillment and happiness that we all actually want, but we
Yeah.
think we're going to get it by just comfort and luxury and just being able to just wallow in joy in like all the material pleasures. That's not what actually creates what we want.
Yeah. It's like, it like, I don't know if it was designed to like mess with our minds or something, but
Oh,
it's just like trying to balance all of that and really, figure out what matters and how you're going
yeah.
to get there, and realizing that like very little is actually in our control. Um, it's an interesting journey, and some I think figure it out better than others. I still have a lot to figure out, but I think having kids too changes things. At least it did for me, and yeah, I mean, just try to be a decent person and focus on what matters, but it's not always easy.
How did that change for you? Because I feel like as entrepreneurs, it's very easy to either go one of two directions, like kind of lose sight of your business in the family, or just putting yourself all into work and
Yeah.
then losing that connection with your kids or your wife. Like
Yeah.
what's some of the things you've learned, or how's that process been for you of like, you said you're stronger now than ever with Brooke. That's so awesome. But like, any tips on like, how did you do that? Because I think a lot of entrepreneurs, I'm thinking that's something that's a real struggle. I'm not married or have kids, so I'm not going to be the one to be
Yeah.
like, yeah, this is how you do it. But like,
I mean, marriage is probably
I
one of the hardest things I've ever done. And I know my wife would agree with that. Um, I'm not an expert on marriage or business. I can just tell you kind of what I've done. And I think the thing that worked for us was just sticking it out and grit and not giving up and continually trying to improve and learn, and having a partner that's going to kind of call you out on your BS. And in the moment, egos get in the way sometimes, and bad habits, from childhood get in the way, and trying to be more self-reflective and understanding where some of those behaviors and thoughts come from. I'm a big believer. I think a lot of it comes from our early childhood development. And, if you had a traumatic or more challenging childhood, you probably got a lot more work to do, on yourself to try to figure those things out. And it's an ongoing thing. You don't just like, aha, I've got it. It's a continual effort, but yeah, just, continuing to try to work on yourself and understand yourself, I think is really important. You're not going to change somebody else, but focus on changing yourself, for the better.
Yeah, no, I think that's excellent advice. So I'd like to pivot back to, you had just started this real estate development business, and you had successfully finished some development projects. You mentioned that you have several different lines of operation, if you will. Can you take our audience through specifically what those are? How it kind of the business as a whole flows.
So I was trying to make money while I was, doing development. So I did brokerage on the side, for various clients. And one of those was Quick Quack Car Wash. And so that was a great client to have. And, I was doing those deals. And then I was also trying to put some development deals together. And then as I got busier on the development side, I needed somebody to kind of take over that account and some of the other ones. And so that's what kind of launched the brokerage division. And then we started adding more people. I had no experience running a brokerage company. I've learned a lot since then. Like, I know the ins and the outs of the economics, and but still learning. And so we grew that organically out of necessity. And then as we started to own some properties, we needed a property manager. Either we're going to have to hire somebody or we did it ourselves. And so we decided to start a property management division, which is run by Rebecca, and she's just amazing. And, and then started managing other people's properties. And we really want to grow that division as well. in the greater Sacramento area. But that's what kind of launched that division out of necessity, similar to brokerage. And then we also have a guy named Matt Tate, who's kind of heading up economic development consulting. That was he did it for 30 years. And so that's a very small division and still, in a growth, growing stage, but we've got that as well. And that kind of came out of some work I was doing with the nonprofit Team California and some connections there. And so those are the divisions and kind of how they've been created. Brokerage is what really launched the company and, is quite honestly where we make most of our money, but it's also the highest risk and also takes the longest to get the return. So the idea was, we can have various income streams to help stabilize the cash flows to grow as a company, and then integrate those verticals together so they can support each other, since they all work together in some extent. And so that's the business model. The challenge with that is you're basically running multiple businesses under one business. And so although they are alike in many ways, they are significantly different in many other ways. And so trying to run multiple companies is quite a challenge.
Absolutely. What were some of your key lessons and key lessons as you've built your business? What advice would you be telling yourself, 11 years ago, as you're starting out on this venture?
Younger Greg.
Younger Greg.
Yeah, if I could go back in time, I'd probably, I don't know, it's hard to say because you learn from a lot of those experiences. I don't know that there's certainly things I would change, but I also learned from a lot of those. I'd probably be a little bit more strategic in focusing on specific asset classes and really, growing that side of the business before adding another division. But I don't know, to some extent, you kind of just take a chance and you do what you think's best in the moment. That's how we got here. So, the other thing I would say is probably, I worked for companies like Chase Bank that were very rigid, process oriented, horrible culture. It was, kind of yelling, barking orders down in order to get what you wanted. So not a lot of people stayed there very long. You got short term, work out of these people, and they worked hard and then they got burnt out and left. So I certainly didn't want that. And then Sleep Train was a great example of a company that had culture. I would say they probably, in some cases, maybe had a little too much culture, with parties and things like that. And so it's trying to find the right balance. And I've been struggling to find that balance. I think we've found it, or we're getting there, to where it needs to be in an environment that people enjoy being in, and there's got to be respect. But respect also is being direct with people and having clear expectations and setting those expectations and having accountability. And, I think to some extent that's been a struggle for me, is holding other people accountable, being very direct and clear in what I need them to do, because I tend to be more of a pleaser. And so I don't want to kind of let people down, which I've found through some of my, I'm part of the CEO group that for kind of more entrepreneurial, visionary type people, that's not uncommon. But as you grow and you get more people, you start to see where that becomes a challenge, and those fractures start to get a little bit bigger. And then you got to figure out, okay, what's the solution? Is it hiring somebody that's just really good at that stuff, which is probably the right solution? And so you're always trying to figure things out and pivot and learn from those. And, what's your competition doing? The other thing is I think I paid too much attention to what my competition was doing, and to what's on LinkedIn, and versus just ignoring all of that and focusing on hey, what are we really good at? And let's just do that, and not pay attention to what other people are doing. I don't know. That's just off the top of my head. There's probably a lot more, but
yeah, no, that's excellent. I'd also like to circle back to, you mentioned a nonprofit cause. Tell us a little bit more about, the causes that are important to you and your involvement in some of these different nonprofit organizations and what they do.
yeah. So I was asked to join Clara. Geez, I think it's been like 5 years now, because they wanted somebody with a little bit more business experience. So what Clara is they've got a facility down here in downtown or midtown area, and they support the performing arts. So they provide space basically at cost, the cost of maintaining the facility, so that performing arts groups can get access to cheap space. So like Sacramento Ballet is in the Clara Center. They use that as their training facility, and there's a number of other ones that are in there as well. And then they also go out to the schools and teach performing arts. And my mom was a ballet teacher. So I thought, hey, I can probably help bring some kind of business insight and acumen to that board. And so I joined, and then eventually became president, and then realized that I have way too much on my plate. And now I'm just a board member. But, I think that in today's environment of, everything's kind of tech and online, and, the schools have gotten rid of a lot of the programs around, not only performing arts, but like I was in ceramics. I loved that class. I was in welding. I loved that class. Like those are some of my favorite classes and best memories and basic, skills that I still to some extent use today. They've eliminated a lot of that. So, we need organizations that provide those types of outlets for kids that, want to, use their hands or, express their feelings through, performing arts. And so, yeah, so that's why I joined that. And then I'm on the board for a group called Team California, which is a nonprofit that's comprised of cities and counties throughout California. Primarily, it's their economic development folks and city managers that are like the involved members, and it's to promote economic growth throughout California. A lot of the members are kind of in Central Valley, somewhat smaller towns. And they had asked me to join because I bring kind of an outside perspective. A lot of them are from the government sector, whereas I have always thought that there's a gap between the communication with developers and cities. They're kind of looked at as like not partners, but more, I don't want to say enemies, but like they challenge, there's challenges there. And a lot of it has to do with just really poor communication between the two and misunderstandings. A lot of people in cities think the developers just make a ton of money and they're greedy and all these things. Like there's a bad reputation around it, but and to some extent there's some truth in that, right? But in a lot of cases that's not the case. They take a lot of risk, and sometimes, often actually they lose money or they don't make any money, right? And so, I wanted cities and counties to better understand that perspective, and then also have the developers understand the perspective of the cities that like, look, they don't know what you know. Their job is to bring in revenue and support the community. And unless you communicate about these things, you're always going to have misalignments, which is what causes that friction. So that's why I joined that group. Great organization. And so those are kind of the ones that I'm involved with. And then a little bit here and there, I've been doing, some volunteer work with Hands for Hope, which is, youth that kind of gives back to the community, because I wanted to get my daughter involved. And, we live in El Dorado Hills, so I wanted her to like recognize what the rest of the world looks like. So that's been really enjoyable. She loves it. So we've been doing that.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm going to pull on another thread that you mentioned. You mentioned, technology. A lot of the entrepreneurs that we have on, we ask them like, hey, how is artificial intelligence? How is today's economic landscape? How is it influencing your business? Like, what do you see the future looking like? So kind of curious to look at that from a real estate development lens.
Boy, that's been a hot topic lately, especially I feel like in the last couple of months since Claude came out and Perplexity and, ChatGPT was like the big thing. And now it's like antiquated to some extent. And I'm a big user of AI. I mean, I've built dashboards to help keep track of things. And I see so many use cases within our business just here, but also in the industry. And so I'm all in, and we're trying to figure out, who do we hire that can help implement a lot of this. So if anyone's listening and they have AI automation skills, and they just want to have a place to nerd out and create some workflows and really build some cool stuff, like we're hiring. So contact me. But I think that now's the time to get involved. I think that our industry historically has always been behind the curve when it comes to technology. And, there's always a joke that like brokers are super old school, some of them still fax, and so I think there's an opportunity to get ahead of the curve before it really hits us. But it's a tough balance, it's like people are worried about, is it going to take my job, or is it, what are the safety concerns? What about confidential information? How do you implement it across the company? It's one thing to have, somebody using, Claude on their desktop and doing some, helping with their workflow, but like, how do you roll that out across a company, right? So there's a lot to figure out. It's complicated, but it's not going anywhere. So whether you like it or not, you got to get on board.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Are there specific segments of commercial real estate that you're focusing more on, and certain segments that you've decided to stay away from because of some of these considerations?
I mean, there's so much opportunity for improvement, even just workflows within our company of like a broker gets a listing, then what are the next steps? And, a lot of that's not, still manual, and it's not efficient. And so there's a lot of opportunities to increase efficiencies there, lead generation, marketing, even on the construction side. Like, to those of you, probably a lot of people don't know what preliminary lien notices are, but when you start construction, you get a lot of these, and you in theory should keep track of them and then match them up with the payments. But they get mailed to you because they get mailed via certified mail. And so it's like, we created a function where we can just now scan them, and it tracks them, puts the expiration date, and we can match them up with, when we make a payment, to make sure that we get the lien release that goes along with it. Like, I mean, that's just like something simple that was created, in a couple of hours, but there's endless use cases for it. I don't think there's anything that I would shy away from right now, except for just being really cognizant of using, clients' information, because it's out in the ether at that point. Everyone's, so, you just got to be really careful with some of that stuff. But
yeah, no, excellent. Justin, as we start to wrap up here, anything that you'd like to circle back to with Greg?
Couple of just quick things. Number one, it's like the Clara. I think I've actually been there. They have like a really cool cafe in there. Did you, being the business savvy person you are, did you have anything to do with that? Of like, you know what? No. If we create this really cool cafe,
I wish I did, but I can't claim credit for that. Seasons Coffee's in there. Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's like this very eclectic like home vibe, grandma's house kind of vibe. It's a cool spot. And Clara's doing some improvements to the landscaping and things like that so that people can hang out more out in the outdoor area. But I didn't have anything to do with that. I was more involved in kind of some of the internal business aspects and dealing with some things with some of the tenants and stuff. But
well, at least that allowed me to do a plug for Claire right there, because it is a really cool little cafe. So.
Everyone should check out Claire. It's awesome. It's a great facility, and does a lot of good work.
Yeah. And I just want to highlight just quickly is like, I think one of the things about Capital Rivers that I've noticed over the years of since I've known you for a long time is just how you guys have really hung your hat on being innovative and open to like disrupting the industry and just to, just compliment you on that. Like you guys have that type of a really cool, innovative culture. And it's something that I really respect of
No, I
what you've
appreciate
been able
that.
to do with your team. So,
Not always easy in an industry that's very
mm.
antiquated and old school. But
100%. That's also what creates the opportunity. It's like
it is. Yeah.
right? Where's the advantage to make those shifts that other people aren't doing, right?
Right.
So
No,
that's all I got. I just wanted to do a plug for Clara and really reinforce, what some of the ways that you guys are really doing great in terms of if you want an innovative, awesome organization to work with on commercial or development. Yes, these are the
yeah.
guys.
I mean, I think, what also kind of makes us unique is that we have the development team, we've got the brokerage team, the property management team, in-house counsel. So like, unlike, I don't want to say unlike a lot, but, some brokerages focus on the transaction side, right? Whereas we can understand the entire life cycle of an asset. And actually, if there's, a unique way of approaching something or there's a challenge on a deal, like we probably have a solution or we can come up with one just based on our collective knowledge and understanding, how to develop a site and the challenges that come with that. And, the management side and what's important in structuring, agreements. And so I think that gives us a really unique perspective. And then we also just like good people. So we're super collaborative and, I've gotten to the point in my career where I want really intelligent, driven, but also good people, that, that work here. And then the same on the client side, right? We want clients for life. We want clients that value the advice that we give them and help them, with what they're trying to achieve. So, yeah, so we're growing. We're looking for more brokers to join the team. We're looking for another property manager to join the team. We're looking for a AI integrator type person to join the team. So,
yeah. Excellent. I was just going to ask Justin, maybe this is what you were going to say, but Greg, where can people find you? You have a website or are you on LinkedIn?
Yeah. So I'm on LinkedIn. We've got a website. My email's Greg, Greg, at capitalrivers.com. So capitalrivers.com. That's also our website, capitalrivers.com. Phone number is 916-514-5225. And I always love connecting with people. You never know where an opportunity is going to come from or how we can help or how somebody might be able to help us. Some of the best deals that we've done and best relationships that I've established have been through kind of random connections and things like this. So, yeah.
And I have somebody who might be a good potentially property management type person. So
Awesome. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, so I can get that.
Appreciate that.
Cool. This has been a pleasure, man. Thank you for joining us. I feel like
thanks for having me.
It's always fun because I know you well, but like sometimes you don't go down certain pathways, and so it's fun to explore some new roads with you on this time.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me.
Thanks, Greg. No, really loved all the different components of what you shared and the advice. So, thanks for coming on.